What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be going over the book The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. Now, this book is a pretty popular book in the startup world, and I think it, in my opinion, is a little overrated. Now, that's not to say it's not a valuable read, and I do actually recommend reading it, and I did find a lot of information out of it, but at the same time, I feel like this is one of those books that everyone kind of just immediately goes to as the startup book, which I guess is what I'm doing right now because this is the first of my book review series. I kind of wanted to mention that in that it is a book that a lot of people almost view as a mandatory reading in a way. It's like a required reading for a startup. And I do think that's true to an extent, but by no means do you have to read it. Really, you just need to know three main concepts in it. And those are testing user assumptions, creating your MVP, and knowing when to pivot. So these three concepts are covered heavily in the book. And it's really, I think, the main, that summarizes the book right there, those three concepts. So let me break those down real quick, one at a time. So when you're building your app or any startup, you're going to be making assumptions about your users, about the app itself, all of that. And you don't want to do too much work and spend too much time without testing those assumptions. So for example, with my app, this travel budget app, I'm assuming that people want to track their budget or plan their budget before going on a trip, and then that they want to track that leading up until their trip. Now, I didn't do this in a lean way at all, the way I've been building this. So I spent about a year building this app, and I never really tested at all if this is something that anyone wants to use. So that's not a great thing to do. And it is, like, you can see how that's a waste of time, right? If no one wants to use this app, then I just wasted that entire year. So that's the value of testing your assumptions. And there's many ways you can do this, like a survey or even just asking people. And the book covers a lot more ways that you can test those assumptions. The next thing is getting to your MVP. And an MVP, it just stands for a minimum viable product. And all that means is getting that app live. So this kind of folds in with testing assumptions, but it isn't the same thing. Really what this means is getting your app to a stable state. If we're talking, I'm putting this in the context of an app. This is really any startup. So really that means getting your startup to a stable state where you can launch it. And you could launch it and ideally start making money. The book has, I don't know, a philosophy of you should be able to sell stuff before you even build it. That's easier said than done, but it does make sense. And that kind of goes into testing assumptions too, because if you can test the assumption and get someone to pay for it, then you know you're going to be able to sell it when it's ready because you already sold it. And the last thing is knowing when to pivot. And all a pivot is just changing the concept of your business a little bit. So with my travel budget example, if I, do some user testing and find out that no one actually wants to track their budget, they are more interested in seeing how much money they're spending while they're on a trip. That is not what I built so far. So I'd have to pivot to kind of make the app do that instead. And knowing when to pivot is talked about in the book a lot more. So it is worth reading for that. But there are times to pivot and there are times to actually stick with your idea. But knowing when is kind of a harder thing to discern. Yeah, those three concepts, testing user assumptions, getting to your MVP, and knowing when to pivot are all pretty much the core of the lean startup. So I would definitely recommend reading it. This is actually a book that I think is great to listen to as well. Some books I think are better actually read physically. This one is not one of those. I think it's a good book to listen to. So if you don't already have an Audible subscription, go ahead and check the link down below and you get the first book for free. So you get the Lean Startup for free, and it does help support the channel. So that's a win-win right there. Comment down below if you've read the book and what you thought about it. Did you think it was a little overrated? What did you learn from it? Did it help you in your startup? My biggest takeaway is that I need to be quicker to launch my app. I need to be quicker to launch my ideas out there. So that's what I'm going to be doing now, and that's what I'm going to be trying to do in the future.